There's different ways to answer that, and it's a very rich question. Sri Aurobindo suggests, and I've also read this elsewhere, that the good and evil entities all live in the lower half of the vital level of the transphysical worlds. And the idea is that these are beings who are adapted to an unevolved situation. Right? So, for example, right now, we can all see that industrialism is killing the biosphere. And yet there are a lot of really intelligent people, like the head of GM, who comes out and says global warming is a crock of shit, right? Because he's adapted to the old way, and so he becomes an active agent for the perpetuation of evil because he's adapted to it, right? And the same thing may be true in the transphysical worlds, that there are beings who are just like waking beings can be evil, so disembodied beings can also be evil. So that's one level of the answer, but there's also a mythic answer, which I like. And what Sri Aurobindo says is, look, every single actual occasion is, in some sense, divine. It is God. And so what's to prevent it from just instantly evolving all the way back into its own true nature? There has to be some kind of obstacle. Otherwise, evolution wouldn't be possible. There has to be some sort of force which holds the negative to make the adventure of consciousness, which is evolution, interesting. And so there are beings who are dedicated to being the loyal opposition. Right? They create difficulty for the sake of making evolution more interesting. So I like that explanation. What?
The law of the opposites.
Law of the opposites, yeah. Yeah, and so evil becomes also an expression of the divine, which I find very, very satisfying. Well, it freaks some people out, but I find it very satisfying. It's also very interesting to me in our discussion here that as we've been talking about this, a lot of questions have come up, like the one you just asked, that I can't answer in terms of this Whiteheadian ontology. I have to bring in the ideas of Sri Aurobindo. Right? My personal belief is that Whitehead is what we need to make an accommodation with science. Whitehead is the guy who went out all the way into the core of physics and blasted it open to allow consciousness to be seen in the very heart of materiality. That's his huge contribution. But I find Whitehead's theology inadequate, and I find his ethics, well, it's illuminating, it's not adequate. And so I go to Sri Aurobindo for that. And I feel that Sri Aurobindo enables us to work from Brahman, or the all and everything, down through what he calls supermind, to the mental level of actual occasions, and all the way down from there to the physical. Right? So Sri Aurobindo gets us from Brahman to the actual occasions at the mental level, and Whitehead takes us the rest of the way down. But the larger questions, the more mythic questions, why is there evolution? What's it about? What's the story here? Whitehead doesn't give us. The story we get from Teilhard de Chardin and from Alfred North Whitehead, and to some extent from Gebser. But what we get from Whitehead is the ontology, right? And that's what we need to make the accommodation with science, which we moderns have to make. Right? But if we want to go beyond that, to the mythic, to the story, to the relationship with whatever we consider to be the divine, to the theology which orients this cosmology, we need to go to Sri Aurobindo and approach it from a different point of view. Right? Those questions keep coming up, but I haven't presented in this weekend a conceptual framework that's adequate for really discussing them. We have to take a different approach for that.
Back to Stuart's question about metaphysical distance.
Mm-hmm.
In trying to understand my experience of time and space, or no time, no space,
mm-hmm.
from an experiential level, I came across a definition that I'm not sure adds clarity or confusion to the subject of metaphysical or transphysical distance.
Mm-hmm.
It's Guy Murchie. I don't know if you've ever come across him. Seven
Murchie?
Mysteries of Life,
No.
Music of the Spheres,
Mm-hmm.
Defines time as the relationship of things to themselves, or what in this context might be occasions to themselves, and space as the relationship of things to other things, or occasions to other things. And so when we hear the great seers talking about our reality being a maya or illusion, or time being illusion, I think the tendency is to think of those things, illusion, as being unreal, rather than like a magician's illusion, where one thing appears, yet behind it is a deeper reality. And maybe that deeper reality of distance at the transphysical level is a pure form of relationship that at the physical level, or the level of abstraction that we're talking about here, is perceived by us as space, when it's more fundamentally just a relationship, higher and higher orders of relationship.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that. I like that. I mean, I don't like when he says that time is relationship to ourselves and space is relationship to others. That sort of goes back to Kant in some way. But I don't like it because space is also, time is also a relationship to others. There is, as relativity has taught us, it should have been obvious from the beginning, there's no such thing as space without time.
Well, exactly.
Right.
Well, I think in this definition, if you combine those two,
Yeah.
then they begin to make sense.
But what I really like about what he's saying here, I like it a lot, is the idea that there is the form of relationship is very fundamental, and that space-time distance is a sort of abstract form of relationship. So in some sense, we might say everything is one in the divine, and there is no space or time in some ultimate sense, if we can make sense of that. But then as we get down to the mental world, as I've been describing it, in the mental world, all the entities are in immediate proximity to each other. We're next to all other entities, and in which case space doesn't have to do with distance anymore. Now, it may be that in the mental world, where we differentiate by our metaphysical system. We're close to people we're close to entities that think like us and distant entities that don't, right? I'm not exactly sure, right? But in a world in which all entities are immediately proximate to all other entities, geometry is irrelevant. Right? So in the mental world, geometrical distance is undefined. Now, we get down into the imaginal world, and it's a little different, because in the imaginal world, as we know it, whenever we're in the imaginal world or the vital world, we're always in a scene. Like in a dream, however odd the dream is, we're in the middle, and there are objects around us, and we can imagine drawing straight lines from us to the objects around us. In that kind of situation, what geometers call projective geometry is operating, because there's a center and there are straight lines. Right? Then when we wake up, we have distance defined in terms of units of straight lines, which isn't the case when we're in a dream. So as we come down through the worlds, relationship becomes more and more reified. And so geometrical space-time is kind of a reification of distance. Whereas distance is geometrical on the physical, it's some sort of morphic resonance on the vital, and it's some kind of meaning resonance on the mental. So we can play with that, and that really fits very deeply with the idea and with the intent of his idea, I think. So that's really helpful. Any other last questions, comments? All right, well then we are done.
Thank you.